Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring how an ancient philosophy, Stoicism, can actually help us make those really tough decisions, especially when we're under pressure.
That's right. And if you're someone who wants to get valuable insights without feeling overwhelmed, well, this deep dive is definitely for you. We've distilled some core Stoic ideas into practical strategies.
Which feels really needed, right?
Mhm.
Modern life throws all sorts of high-pressure decisions at us, career moves, financial choices, relationship dilemmas, even unexpected crises.
Absolutely. And we should clarify up front, Stoicism isn't about being emotionless or suppressing feelings. That's a common misconception.
Okay, good point. So what is it about then?
It's really a system for, let's say, rational resilience. It helps you understand your emotions and use your reason so they don't hijack your judgment, especially when the stakes are high.
Rational resilience, I like that. So what's the core idea we should grasp first?
The absolute foundation is differentiating between what you can control and what you can't. It's fundamental to the whole philosophy.
Things like, my thoughts and actions are controllable, but external events or what other people do, that's outside my control.
Precisely. So the mission for this deep dive, really, is to equip you with a robust mental framework based on these Stoic principles. The goal is clearer, more courageous decision-making under pressure.
That sounds incredibly useful. So where do we start with this idea of control?
Let's begin with the Stoic philosopher Epictetus and his foundational concept, the dichotomy of control. He put it very plainly. Some things are up to us, and some things are not up to us.
Okay. And what falls into each category, according to him?
So up to us includes our opinions, our impulses, our desires, and our aversions, basically, our own judgments and actions, the things we can directly steer. Not up to us, on the other hand, includes things like our body, getting sick, our property, our reputation, our job or position. These aren't fully determined by our direct actions.
Right. External factors play a huge role there. But how does this simple distinction actually help when you're facing a really tough call under pressure?
Well, think about it. When we're stressed, we often get completely fixated on uncontrollable outcomes. Will this project succeed? How will people react? What if my choice leads to disaster?
Yeah, those late-night what-if spirals, I know them well.
Exactly. The Stoic approach flips the focus. Instead of agonizing over uncertain outcomes, you concentrate on what you can control within the decision-making process itself.
Which would be?
Things like your judgment about the situation, your initial impulses, should I lash out or stay calm, what you choose to desire or avoid, and crucially, the actions you actually take. By consciously focusing on these internal elements, you reclaim your sense of agency.
So it's less about trying to bend the external world to your will and more about mastering your internal world.
You got it. And it's crucial to understand this isn't about being passive. It's about directing your energy towards what you truly own, your effort and your intention.
You mentioned an archer analogy earlier.
Ah, yes. Imagine an archer. Their skill lies in aiming carefully and releasing the arrow cleanly. That's what they control. But whether a sudden gust of wind blows the arrow off course, that's outside their control. The archer's excellence is judged by their aim and release, not solely by whether they hit the bullseye every single time.
Okay, that makes sense. So applying this dichotomy to our decisions means we focus on our aim and release our judgment and actions, rather than obsessing over whether we're guaranteed to hit the target every time.
Precisely. And this shift in mental energy brings remarkable clarity and calm because you stop fighting battles you can't win. You focus where you actually have power within yourself.
All right, so once we understand what's in our control and what isn't, what's the next step in making these tough decisions?
The Stoics championed reason, or logos as they called it, as the guiding star for navigating our inner world effectively, especially under pressure. Think of it as our capacity for clear, objective thought.
So reason, as opposed to just going with gut feelings or raw emotion?
Exactly. The Stoics contrasted reason with what they termed passions, or paith. These aren't just any emotions, but intense, disruptive emotional reactions like overwhelming fear, anger, or craving, which they believed stemmed from faulty judgments.
Can you give an example of how reason helps when emotions are running high during a tough decision?
Sure. Imagine receiving harsh criticism at work. The initial emotional reaction might be defensiveness or anger, right? A reasoned response, however, would involve pausing, objectively assessing the criticism, separating the delivery from the content, and choosing a calm, controlled response rather than lashing out or shutting down.
So reason acts like a filter, helping us process the situation without the distortion of those intense emotions.
Perfectly put. It allows for objective analysis.
Hmm.
And the Stoics develop specific techniques to engage reason, especially when you're feeling the heat.
Likewise.
One key technique is what they called objective representation. This involves describing the situation to yourself in the most neutral, factual terms possible, stripping away the drama and subjective interpretations.
So instead of thinking, my boss unfairly attacked me, you'd think,
You'd think, my boss stated dissatisfaction with aspect X of the project during the meeting. See the difference? It lowers the emotional temperature immediately.
yeah, that small shift in language feels like it could make a big difference.
It really does. Another technique is questioning your impressions. When you have a strong emotional reaction, actively examine the basis for that feeling. Ask yourself why you feel that way and whether that feeling is based on an accurate assessment or a potentially flawed judgment.
Like fact-checking your own feelings in a way.
Kind of, yeah. And then there's logical analysis, actually breaking down the decision you're facing, listing potential actions, and weighing the pros and cons for each based on logic and likely consequences, not just emotional preference.
That sounds like a fairly standard decision-making tool, but grounded in that Stoic emphasis on reason.
Right. And a more uniquely Stoic technique is what Marcus Aurelius called the view from above. This involves zooming out, imagining the situation from a vast, almost cosmic perspective.
How does that help?
Thinking about the sheer scale of the universe and the relative smallness of your immediate problem can diminish its emotional weight and encourage more rational thought. It provides perspective.
Like zooming out on Google Maps until your street disappears. You see the bigger picture.
Exactly like that. Engaging reason through these techniques helps ensure your decisions are based on clarity, not chaos, making your choices more considered and coherent.
Okay, so we're focusing on what we control, using reason to guide our internal responses.
Yeah.
What was the ultimate aim for the Stoics through all this?
For the Stoics, the ultimate aim, the highest good, was virtue. They saw virtue as the only true good in life. Everything else, health, wealth, reputation, they considered indifference.
Indifference. Does that mean they didn't matter at all?
Not quite. They acknowledge that these indifferents often have value. We naturally prefer health to sickness, for example. But crucially, the Stoics argued they aren't intrinsically good or bad. Their value depends entirely on how we use them, whether our use is virtuous or not.
Ah, so wealth itself isn't good or bad, but using wealth wisely is virtuous.
Precisely. And this pursuit of virtue, living in accordance with our rational and social nature, is what the Stoics believed leads to eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or a state of inner peace and fulfillment that isn't dependent on external circumstances.
So what are these core virtues specifically?
The Stoics identified four cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance.
Okay, break those down a bit.
Sure. Wisdom or prudence is about discerning what's truly good, bad, and indifferent, making sound judgments based on understanding. Justice is about fairness, kindness, honesty in our dealings with others, respecting our shared humanity. Courage, or fortitude, isn't just physical bravery, but moral courage facing difficulty and sticking to what's right, resilience. And temperance, or moderation, is about self-control, balance, avoiding excess, resisting impulsive choices.
They all sound interconnected, like it would be hard to have true courage without the wisdom to know what's worth fighting for.
Absolutely. They saw them as a unified whole. And so when facing a tough decision, the ultimate Stoic question becomes, what is the virtuous thing to do here?
Meaning, when weighing options, we should ask ourselves which choice best aligns with wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance.
Exactly. Prioritizing virtue anchors your decision-making in something stable and within your control, your own character. This fosters inner integrity, regardless of how external circumstances ultimately play out.
Okay, guided by reason, focused on what's controllable, aiming for virtue. But what about when we know what we should do, but strong emotions just seem to pull us off course?
That brings us back to those passions, those disruptive emotions the Stoics believed arise from errors in judgment about what's truly good or bad. Think intense fear, anger, or craving.
So it's not the event itself causing the emotion, but our judgment about it.
That's the core idea. For instance, panic before a presentation isn't caused by the presentation itself, but maybe by your judgment that failure would be catastrophic, or that your self-worth depends entirely on the audience's approval.
Yeah, okay, I can see that. So how do we tame these passions, as you said, so they don't sabotage rational decision-making?
The Stoics develop some powerful mental exercises. One is premeditatio malorum. Literally, the premeditation of evils.
Sounds a bit grim. Why would you want to do that?
The goal isn't to be negative, but to mentally prepare. By deliberately contemplating potential setbacks before they happen, maybe losing a job, facing criticism, you rehearse them mentally. This reduces their shock value and lessens the grip of fear and anxiety if they actually occur. Seneca said, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand."
Right, it makes sense. Like a mental fire drill for adversity.
Exactly. Another technique, which we touched on, is the view from above, gaining perspective to diminish the emotional charge of immediate problems. And a third key exercise is cognitive distancing.
What's that?
It's about consciously separating the external event from your judgment about it. Reminding yourself, as Epictetus famously said, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them.
So creating some mental space between what happens and how we react to it.
Precisely. By recognizing your emotional triggers and consciously deploying these techniques, you can prevent the passions from overwhelming reason and leading to impulsive, non-virtuous decisions.
This is really insightful. Okay, so if we're facing a tough decision right now, using the Stoic framework, what's the very first practical step we should take?
The crucial first step is to consciously pause before reacting. In high-pressure situations, our instinct is often to jump straight into action, but that urgency can bypass rational thought.
Just stop.
Yes, create space for reason to engage. Take a breath. Resist the urge to immediately form an opinion or leap into action. Remember Viktor Frankl's point about the space between stimulus and response. In that space lies our power to choose.
Okay, pause. Then what after that moment of stillness?
Once you've paused, the next task is to perceive objectively. The Stoics aimed for fantasia cataleptic, an accurate impression of reality, untainted by subjective judgments, assumptions, or emotional coloring.
So trying to see the situation purely as it is, without adding my own interpretation.
Exactly. If you receive negative feedback, for instance, instead of immediately jumping to, "my boss hates me," try to focus only on the factual points of the feedback itself, what was actually said.
And that objective perception is key to preventing those faulty judgments we talked about earlier.
Precisely. It establishes a factual foundation for reason to build upon, rather than a foundation of fear or anger. Techniques here include sticking to sensory data, what did I actually see or hear, using neutral language to describe events, and consciously separating the facts from your opinions about the facts.
Got it. Step 1. Pause and perceive objectively. What's the next move?
After getting that objective view, step 2 is to consult your inner compass. This means turning inward and reflecting on your core values and principles, particularly rooted in those Stoic virtues we discussed.
And we ask ourselves, what would wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance suggest in this situation?
Exactly. Try translating those broader virtues into specific principles relevant to your life. Maybe justice becomes act fairly towards everyone involved. Then, for each potential course of action you're considering, ask, does this align with wisdom, with justice, courage, temperance?
And this helps ensure a decision isn't just a reaction, but a conscious expression of who we want to be.
Perfectly said. It anchors your choice in something deeper and more stable than the shifting sands of circumstance or emotion.
Okay, we've perceived objectively, checked our inner compass. What's step 3?
Step 3 is to analyze with logic, not fear. Pressure often triggers that fight or flight response, and fear distorts our perception, making us magnify downsides and focus on worst-case possibilities instead of probabilities.
So we need to consciously push past that fear.
Yes. Engage your rational faculty. Gather relevant information dispassionately. Identify realistic options. Logically weigh the pros and cons of each, focusing on the aspects within your control. Assess probabilities, not just scary possibilities, and actively counter catastrophic thinking.
It's about making an informed choice, based on reason, not just reacting to anxiety.
That's the goal. Courage might still be needed to act, absolutely, but the decision itself should be grounded in rational assessment, not fear.
Right. After analyzing logically, what's the next consideration?
Step 4 is to consider your duties and responsibilities. This brings in the Stoic concept of orchiosis, that idea of our natural connection and widening circles of concern. Our choices affect others.
So it's not just about us.
Correct. Think about your roles: parent, employee, friend, citizen, and the duties associated with them. Ask yourself, who depends on this decision? What obligations do I have toward them? Evaluate your options based on how well they align with these duties.
This sounds like applying the virtue of justice on a broader scale.
It really is. It ensures our choices are not only rational and principled for us personally, but also responsible and considerate within our social context.
Okay, we've paused, perceived, consulted values, analyzed logically, considered duties. Now we actually have to decide.
That's step 5. Choose with courage and act with resolve. Deliberation has to lead to a decision. Avoid analysis paralysis. Stoic courage, remember, isn't the absence of fear, but judging virtue as more important than fear. Trust the process you've gone through. Prioritize long-term character. Be willing to stand by your principles and make the call based on your rational and ethical judgment.
Okay, make the choice based on that judgment. And the act with resolve part.
That means committing to your chosen action. Focus your efforts and resist second-guessing or wavering based on anxiety unless, of course, significant new information comes to light. It's not stubbornness, but confident commitment rooted in the thoroughness of the preceding steps.
Got it. We've chosen, we've acted. What's the final step in this framework?
The final step brings us full circle back to the dichotomy of control. Accept the outcome with equanimity. Remember, the outcome is largely external, outside your direct control. Railing against it is irrational.
So aiming for that mental calmness no matter what happens.
Exactly. And the Stoics even went further, recommending amor fati, a love of fate, actively embracing whatever happens as necessary, or at least as the reality we must work with. Acceptance involves recognizing the limits of your control, focusing on your response to the outcome, which is controllable, finding opportunities for virtue even in unwelcome results, and learning without regret, focusing on future improvement.
This final step feels crucial for maintaining inner peace and recognizing that our success lies in making virtuous choices, not in always controlling the external world.
It absolutely is. Acceptance is the ultimate expression of rational strength and resilience in the Stoic view.
This has been such an insightful deep dive into Stoic decision-making. It feels much more practical and actionable than many people might think.
It really is. Stoicism offers a powerful framework for navigating tough choices by focusing on what we truly control, our judgments and actions, and striving to act virtuously.
For anyone listening who's facing a difficult decision right now, maybe just running through these 6 steps mentally could be really helpful.
Definitely. And remember, consistent practice, even with small daily decisions, builds that decision fitness over time, making it easier to apply these principles when the stakes are really high.
That's a great takeaway. So the real power lies not in avoiding pressure, but in cultivating the inner resilience to meet it with wisdom and courage, leading hopefully to a more deliberate and fulfilling life.
Well said. And for those interested in exploring further, there are fantastic resources available on Stoic philosophy and its practical applications.
Thank you so much for joining this deep dive. We hope it's provided some valuable tools for navigating the pressures of life.